In times like these, we need faith that's victorious, and you can walk in it. Welcome to Victorious Faith with Pastor Mark Cowart.
Hello and welcome to the broadcast today. So good to have you with us. We have as our guest all week, this week and next week, Bishop Joshua Lwere from Uganda.
Thank you.
And at the time of this taping, you just landed last night, and we appreciate you being here so much because there are totally different time zones. You're about 10 hours ahead over in Uganda.
Yes.
And thank you, Bishop Joshua, for being here.
Thank you.
I tell you this.
It's a delight for me to be here. I always enjoy it. It's like coming back home.
And this is more than just a visit. I'm telling you, there is power in what I believe is the Lord's assignment for you and how He's using you in Uganda and what we need in America. And I want to make available to you, there's a couple of things. First, if you'd like to get these broadcasts are available for purchase. And many years ago when we first met, we had you here and you were teaching on thrones and altars. And this is more than just a teaching because they're living it out. I feel like I've had a front row seat to watching the transformation of a nation. You know, we have the saying here, Bishop Joshua, that at CFAN, that everything God does is through relationships. And that's why you have to guard the relationships that the Lord orchestrates, because the enemy will always try to destroy those. And this is a relationship that I am telling you, I know God put together. And it's been awesome to see why. And so the years ago when I first met you, it was about the time the Lord gave you that revelation. Something very profound happened with you and the president of Uganda, and we'll talk more about that later. So that information's on your screen. But Bishop Joshua, we left off yesterday with just an incredibly powerful revelation that God chose Nebuchadnezzar. And it did not fit Israel's framework because he was an idolater. That time he crafted that big statue of him and demanded people. And the scriptures that we read yesterday. So let's pick up where we left off, because you say elections, God uses leaders, those are gates. And you have to understand times and seasons. So let's pick up where we left off.
What I was explaining was what we did in Uganda to capture the opportunity of the time. Because when God is dealing with nations, we are told in the book of Acts chapter 17, verse 26, that the Lord himself, from one man, Adam, he formed all the nations of the earth. He determined their boundaries and the times when those nations would be there. So the times is the key there. The boundaries and the times. And these times are gates in which God moves and works through nations. And for him to work, he works through people, the people he chooses. When he wants to, for example, we took an example of when God wanted to judge Israel. Whenever God wanted to judge Israel, he used Gentiles. Whenever God wanted to bless Gentiles, he used Israel. So that is the way he works. He uses Gentiles to punish Israel, but he uses Israel to bless the Gentiles. And so you can't change that. That is how he does it. So at the time when he wanted to punish Israel, because he had told them, as long as you keep the sabbatical, that's every 7 years, leave the land to rest. Till it's 6 years, leave it to rest for 1 year. They forgot to do that for 490 years, cheating a cumulative total of 70 years. That is the message that Jeremiah the prophet has to deliver to the nation. That this is God's audit. 70 years you've cheated, now you have to leave the land so that the land may enjoy its Sabbath. But if you repent, that can be extended. Every time a nation repents, Instead of judgment, a revival comes. So revival and judgment are always, each is waiting for the other. If people repent, the revival follows. If they don't, then it's the judgment. Ooh. So now, Jeremiah comes and tells Zedekiah, who is the king at that time, when the clock is ticking. And instead of Zedekiah listening to Jeremiah, the prophet of God, he listens to those people who are just there to argue to this. You know, we always have such people in church, politicians, what? They're not after what God wants. They're after what suits them at that time. The church is supposed to be the prophet of God. The church is supposed to be sensitive to what God is saying. Not what we want, not what will, not our preferences. We have human preferences. But what we've learned in Uganda is not to listen to our preferences. We would rather say, oh Lord, what exactly do you want? We will pray that your will is done, rather than our political preferences, tribal preference. I come from a different tribe from the president. The president comes from another tribe. My tribe was the predominant one. So my people would want us to be in leadership, and as a Muganda, I'd want, but to me, that's not the important thing. Being a Christian, my value system changed.
Can I insert this? Because you and I have talked about this.
Yeah.
One day you told me a story. I think your brother came to bring you some food to bless you. And there was someone from your church of a different tribe. And so he says, what is he doing here?
In this house.
And didn't he take and...
Yeah, he had brought matoke, which is a very good chicken, and chicken is, you know, people like chicken very much.
It's a staple.
And milk and other groceries. And he finds my wife in the sitting room, and we have another, family of another tribe. They're living with us. We've called them, they're going to live with us for a few days until we give them their own house. He calls my wife outside and says, how can you have these people of this tribe?
Just because they're of a different tribe?
Yeah, because that tribe wanted to annihilate us during the war, Bote's war. You know, this is the tribe that he was fighting us. So how can you have them in this house? And so he said, don't allow them to touch any of the things, this stuff. So, but that is the tribal issues.
And so here's what happened. I literally had a thought when I said, Joshua, I just had this thought.
Yeah.
So in Uganda, every one of you are the same color.
Yeah.
But kill each other.
Exactly.
And I ask you what that was, and the answer is tribalism.
Yeah. So just as you have racism, we have tribalism. It's just as deep-rooted as as racism is. But until somebody is delivered from tribalism, racism, you cannot love or follow the Lord, because his will at any given time will go contrary to what we feel. So we can no longer allow our tribal sentiments, racial sentiments to interfere with God's will, because God has a plan for every nation. For example, this particular president, where he's coming from, this is the tribe that welcomed the revival, the East African revival in 1935. And the way God rewards people who follow him, who serve him, is leadership, prosperity, and promotion. So it's the time when God is promoting and rewarding that particular tribe for having embraced the revival. So if you stand in the way, whether you like it or not, you'll be going against the very same Lord whom you love, who you want. There were so many other opportunities where other leaders would have come in other than the present leader. Okay.
Well, I was going to interject. So I just got back from being with you just a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
And the one morning we were having breakfast waiting for the one gentleman, and one of the other ministers came, and he started talking about the East Africa revival.
Yeah.
And this is important because we must have revival in America.
Yeah.
There is a great awakening, but I started putting together, and then I started studying a little bit, that East Africa revival came, And all of a sudden, you're still seeing the effect of it, even in the president of your country, because his mother was born again out of that.
Yeah.
And that's why
the president's mother was among the very key people of that revival. Very prayerful woman. Spent all her life praying for her children, praying for. I went to that village when I was doing research. The mother of the president, together with another reverend and a group, they would wake up in the morning and pray for the whole village, one name after another. I found these big black books. They would write Mr. So and so, the neighbor, and all his children, and they would pray for each of the children. They would go to another day from morning to evening, praying for the whole. I was amazed. Now the widow of that reverend was 96 years. I found her there, and the night that reverend died, who was praying with the president's mother, the night he died, the day he died, he warned his children 3 days ahead. Said, in 3 days I'll be going. Then on that morning he told them, today is the last time that you have to bring food to me, because he would wake up in the morning, go into what we call the plantations, and he would pray the whole day. They even ended up putting a small shelter for him because he would pray the whole day. Pastor Mark, this guy prayed for the last about 20 or 30 years of his life until he was very old. He would wake up in the morning, go into that shed, pray the whole day. They would take lunch there, evening tea there, and then he would come back in the evening. And he had these big books praying for all the people in the village. So this President Museveni and all his colleagues, these are the beneficiaries of the prayers of the president's mother and these kind of people. The revival, the East African revival, affected these people.
This is an encouragement for intercessors.
Yeah.
How long do you think it was from the time these prayers were being prayed and they were logging until they started seeing the fruit of it?
Oh, it took many years, because the revival was in 1935. President Museveni became president in 1986. Yeah, how many years are those? The parents died. She lived and she saw her son become president, but then died along the way. But when you hear the story of the president and his brother, they always survived narrowly when all the rest of the soldiers would be dead. Like his brother, all the limbs are full of bullets, but he always survived. When parents pray for their children,
yes,
they leave a legacy, they leave because you think about the war, 5 years of war, so many died. The colleagues of the president, all of them died. When you read his book, it's called Sowing the Mustard Seed. He wrote his own life.
The president wrote.
Yeah. And he talks about all those ways that he survived. When I was young, we always thought that he was like a cat who would disappear and become a cat, because the survival, the many times he survived.
He was a soldier that was after actually Idi Amin, wasn't he?
They were fighting Idi Amin. Then they fought Obote. Amin slaughtered all his colleagues and he survived. So many times he survived alone.
Only
when everybody,
the prayers probably.
Only, there's no way you explain that. So this is what we are talking now about. God's timings, how he brings leaders, and how the prayers of parents affect, because the way God rewards those who have served him is leadership. He gives them leadership. Look at David. David has been good. David, you've served me, so you'll always have a leader on your throne. So that's one. Number two is prosperity. Solomon prospered. It wasn't his own doing. The third is promotion. He gives you a great name. David, I'll give you a great name. When you mention Abraham, when you mention Moses, the next one is who? David. So God gives those three to the people, the revivalists. Even here, Jonathan Edwards, all these people who Whitfield. When you look at their lineage and their descendants, they always become leaders. They always become prosperous. They always get great names.
I have to insert this. I think the message from Uganda to America is you sought the will of God.
Yeah.
I think in America, one of our probably fatal flaws, we've become, I think our biggest test as Christians is prosperity, not poverty. When you're poor, when you're in poverty, what else do? You cry out to the Lord.
Yeah.
But when you get prosperity, in Deuteronomy chapter 8, that's where the Lord said, I'm going to test you. I'm going to see after you've built goodly houses, after your silver and gold is multiplied, I want to see, is your heart still
seeking me?
And Uganda, that's the message, because you bring up something else. God chose Nebuchadnezzar. He called Nebuchadnezzar his
my servant.
But you also mentioned Cyrus.
Yeah.
Now, this is for America. There was a correlation between President Donald Trump and Cyrus. And so there was a prophetic word about Donald Trump, and the Lord said, I'm going to fool the people. I thought, well, boy, Lord, did you ever fool the people? Because when he came down the escalator and announced he was running for president, personally, I saw the spirit realm explode. 17 Republican candidates, and people would say, he can never be president, he's a joke, he's this. And so anyway, he gets into office, and we begin to see people, believers, rejecting his leadership, and yet he was the greatest friend of the church, greatest friend to Israel. What I see, the distinction with Uganda, you recognize the windows, the doors, the opportunities. Because King David had a horrible personal life. He was a bad father. He was not good as a man. Had his closest warrior, Uriah, murdered, lied about it to cover it up, slept with his wife, the whole thing. So Uganda, what you're saying is, they basically, because of that revival, the people prayed, they didn't grow weary and well-doing, because there was a lot of years. And now you're reaping the fruit of their labors, but Uganda, and particularly, the Lord's used you to lead in this, to recognize those windows and opportunities and
it's so key
them.
Because the way I put it is this: when you miss the timing of the Lord, you go into a cycle. Israel was supposed to have entered the promised land only a few months after they left Egypt. So they didn't enter. What did it cost them?
40 years.
Yeah. So it's like these revolving doors. You have to time it. When it's a revolving door, you have to time it and then enter. If you don't, you have to wait until. So that's how nations are. And at any given time, if you miss that, even in the individual life, even the family life, there are times of God's visitation. Jesus came to Israel and said, you missed the day of your visitation. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, who kills the prophet, you did not recognize the day of your visitation. And when you don't, you miss. And sometimes you don't even realize that you've missed. Look at that whole generation that died in the wilderness. They died in the 40 years. What a cost. Yet they continue to see miracles because their clothes continued growing. They saw food raining, but they had missed God. People set off for miracles of prosperity of this when they have actually missed the purposes of God. You can still have miracles in the wilderness. Israel continued to see their clothes
didn't wear out.
Yeah, their food raining from heaven, but they had still missed God. They were still in rebellion. So that's no sign. Just because you are prosperous doesn't mean you are in the purposes of God. So the most important thing is always to, what is God saying? What is He doing? So that we can become part of that. Because only then can you usher the nation into its redemptive purposes. America is a prophetic nation, and God raised it specifically to be a prophetic nation. You're a symbol of the ego and other history. So for it to become greater and greater and greater is for it to walk into those purposes. The revolving door, the times, you capture the times, that is capturing the gates. God told Abraham, your children will capture the gates. The enemy captures the gates, And we are supposed to capture the gates. Jesus said, the gates, I build my church, and the gates of hell, because those gates have to do with the timings of God's working in the nation, in the city, and through leaders. Because when God is doing something new, he has to raise a leader, another leader, any type of leader. He chooses. He knows who, the way he formed us, he knows who can manage that one. When God appeared to Daniel, through Jesus appearing to Daniel, he saw the change that was going to come between Medo-Persia and Greece. So he sees the prince of Persia. He says, there has been a fight. I'm going back to fight the prince of Persia, because after I've defeated him, then the prince of Grecia will come. So you see, when Persia is leaving, God is changing things to bring in the Greeks. The Greek, have to defeat the Persians. And that is part of God's plan. And the devil fought so that Daniel does not see that vision, because for 21 days he was fighting. And the angel said, the reason I've come is to bring this message. Why would the devil fight that? Because he knows the moment you capture, you understand, then you are able to align with the purposes and the will of God, and you then pray them in the purpose. God had already shown Nebuchadnezzar the floor. Babylon will come first, Medo-Persia second, Greece third, Roman Empire, and so on. So what God has revealed is his word, and the devil will fight it tooth and nail. It's with the children of God to stand and then make sure his purposes are fulfilled. Each of those kingdoms had a purpose to fulfill, including Nebuchadnezzar. God said, this is my servant Nebuchadnezzar. You cannot remove him until the 70 years are finished. And he continued, 70 years. It is then that Cyrus now has to rise. And God said, Cyrus, my servant, my anointed.
Now, who was Cyrus?
Cyrus was a foreigner. He was from Media. He started as a small man. His father, Astyages, was a wicked man. He had a daughter. And the daughter, the magician said, this daughter of yours is going to produce a son who is going to overthrow you. So he threw him there in one of the territories of Persia. So the daughter ended up having the prince of Persia, one of the Persian princes, marrying, and that is Cyrus, how Cyrus is born. And then he keeps conquering, and then he conquers his father-in-law. All these battles, he conquered without any war. Because God saw him. God touched him.
And then he basically made it so that the Jews could worship again.
Because that's the key why he raises him. He said, now the work of Cyrus will be to bring back the Jews to their nation. Is that important? Yes. Because after the 70 years, one cycle ended, these Jews have to go back, and God had already said it by his word. Listen to Ezra, how Ezra put it. Ezra chapter 1, he declares clearly that that has to take place. Ezra is here, chapter 1. How does Cyrus know about this? Because when the Medo-Persians are attacking the Babylonians are so sure. They have a big city. It is, the walls are 187 feet thick. Nobody could assail them. So they were inside. Belshazzar was so sure that he threw a party when he heard that the Medo-Persians are attacking. They have enough water inside the city. It came by the river Euphrates. So what Cyrus did, his army, was to go down and stop the Euphrates River and go down, because the depth of the wall from the ground was 30 feet. So there was no way. 30 feet, that's...
And the water supply was key. Yeah. If you could cut off the water supply, you could...
And then there was no way for them to go through the water. So they went deeper. And so they dug below the wall, entered, and dug the wall and ended up in the state house, Belshazzar's house. So they dug all the way from... And then the trench they kept, they had been digging for a long time. They didn't know where they would end. But then they ended inside the city, inside the king's bedroom. So that night when Belshazzar sees the handwriting, and Daniel says, mene, mene, tekel, upharsin, your kingdom is going to be taken away from you today. He didn't know that by that time the Medo-Persians were already, they're about to break through. So he leaves the hall and goes back to his room, locks, and these people, the Medo-Persians, had managed to break through, and they killed him like a rat, right inside his house, bedroom. And so all of them entered through the king's bedroom, and he took over. So majority of the people in Babylon didn't know that they had been, overthrown. For 3 days, they was looking at other army people and said, who are these? He said, we are already taken over. But our gates are still locked. He said, yeah, they entered through the what? Down. That's what God was saying to Cyrus in Isaiah 45. He said, wow. I'm going to give you nations. The gates will not stand up against you. You see, they had 100 gates surrounding the city.
So Cyrus was not a godly man.
No, he wasn't.
But God chose him, and he gave Belshazzar.
First of all, notice that the Babylonians' time of judgment has come. It has to be another nation, the Medo-Persians. They are going to follow. And the Medo-Persians have to be led by a person. So God chooses the person, Cyrus. He even chose the mother. So Cyrus is the one who's going to lead that. And he said, I'll go before you. Not even gates of iron and bronze will stand before you, because
there it is.
There were 100 gates. They were so high, nobody could scale them. They had people all over. So they were sure. Yet God gave them wisdom, and they came through the ground. So they took over. And who tells Cyrus about this? 3 days later, Cyrus comes on a horse entering the city, and Daniel, the very old man, showed him Isaiah 45 and says, yeah, that's how Cyrus come to know about
That's
it.
a great place. We're out of time, Bishop Joshua. That's great, because there's so many places we can go from here.
Yeah.
And I want to encourage you to make sure to be with us tomorrow. Yeah. This is incredibly powerful. There are so many things going off inside of me right now in relation to what I'm thinking about America, because of the destiny we have. So here's what I'd like to do. We make available for purchase, information's on your screen, our talks today. Every time I get around Bishop Joshua, I just begin to get downloads, and I have to study, and I make notes that I have to go and dig even deeper. We make that available. Also, his series when he taught here years ago on thrones and altars, that's available on the screen. Thanks for joining us today. I'll see you tomorrow at this same time. Until then, may the Lord's richest blessings be yours.
Most Christians firmly agree our nation is on a dangerous trajectory. The alarm's been sounded, and God is awakening His people. Order your copy of this new teaching today at markcowart.org or call us at 1-800-590-4764.
Thank you for watching the Victorious Faith broadcast. I want to invite you, if you're in the Colorado Springs area, would you join us for a Sunday service at Church for All Nations? So we want to invite you to one of our services at 9 or 11 a.m. You can also be a part of services online, and you can check out all of our kids ministry episodes on the CFAN app.
Find a campus and connect with us at churchforallnations.com.